They are worshipped in every corner of the world, draped in gold, encased in glass, the names whispered in prayer by millions. Holy men and women who, we are told, were closer to God than the rest of us. They are called as saints. Saint George, Saint Xavier, Saint Alphonsus, Saint Augustine, Saint Anthony, Saint Sebastian, Saint Joseph, Saint Thomas, Saint Jude, Saint Peter, and last but not the least, Saint Teresa. Saints. The chosen few, canonized and immortalized, paraded before the faithful as divine intermediaries. Across continents and centuries, they have comforted the grieving, healed the sick, and punished the doubting. Or so we've been told. In India too, their presence is everywhere, from grand cathedrals in Goa to quiet chapels in Kerala. Their stories are told with reverence, their lives painted as perfect, their bodies turned into relics, and their words unquestioned. But once we move past the incense and examine the evidence, the question becomes disturbingly clear. Were these people truly divine? Or were they simply products of myth-making, money, and religion? All across the world and in India, some of the most brutal chapters of history were written in their names. Temples were destroyed, entire communities forced to convert, children torn from their culture, and those who refused, tortured, killed, forgotten. This isn't a story about faith. It's a story about power, about how sainthood became a tool, not of God, but of cruel men. Hi, I am Anand and you're watching Pale Blue Thoughts, where we stitch together scientific facts and rip apart religions. Let us begin by first removing the halos. Strip away the sacred art, and what you find behind many of the church's most celebrated saints is not a divine virtue, but acts of unspeakable cruelty. Take for instance Saint George, one of the most famous of all saints, popularly known as Givargis in Kerala. He is the patron saint of England, of soldiers, and oddly enough, of syphilis patients. His image, mounted on horseback, slaying a dragon to save a princess, is iconic. But George the man? He was more likely a Roman soldier who was executed around 303 AD. The dragon? That came nearly 800 years later, a medieval fairy tale repurposed as religious propaganda. In reality, George was no dragon slayer, but his myth was too lucrative, too inspiring, and so was used during the Crusades to justify religious violence. Throughout medieval Europe, Saint George's image was painted on war flags and weapons, especially during the Crusades, where thousands of people were butchered in the name of faith. The red cross on white, now known as the Saint George's Cross, was not a symbol of peace, but was one of religious violence. Then we have Saint Augustine of Hippo, a towering theological figure whose ideas define much of Western Christianity. Augustine was brilliant, yes, but also deeply problematic. He gave us the doctrine of original sin. He believed unbaptized babies deserved death. His writings taught people to feel guilty, fear sex, and accept pain as a way of life. Saints like Augustine didn't guide people, they controlled them. And here in India, we are told to venerate Saint Thomas the Apostle, supposedly the first Christian to set foot on Indian soil. According to tradition, he arrived in Kerala, converted Brahmins, and was martyred near Chennai. But that entire story lacks historical foundation. There are no contemporary records, no archaeological evidence. The earliest mention of Thomas in India appears centuries after his death. The most troubling case, however, lies in Goa, where the glass-encased body of Saint Francis Xavier draws millions. Called the Apostle of the East, Xavier is venerated for spreading Christianity in Asia. But in his own letters, he wrote about separating Hindu children from their families, about the need to bring in Inquisition to India. He directly ordered for the Inquisition, which happened in Goa in 1560, where thousands of Hindus and Muslims were tortured, raped in front of their families, and forced to accept the loving Jesus as the one true God. What followed was a reign of torture, mutilation, and execution. Whole villages were destroyed, sacred texts were burned, and those who refused to convert punished brutally. And yet, this man is still called a saint. And just when you thought the sainthood factory couldn't get more ridiculous, meet Guinefort, the greyhound who became a saint. No, really, a literal dog. Guinefort was a greyhound belonging to a noble family in 13th century France. One day, the master returned home to find his baby missing and Guinefort covered in blood. Believing the dog had killed the child, he immediately killed Guinefort. Moments later, he found the baby, alive and unharmed, next to the body of a dead snake. The dog had actually saved the child from the snake. Realizing the tragic mistake, the family buried the dog with honor. But then, something unusual happened. Local peasants began visiting the dog's grave, praying to him as a protector of children and healer of sick babies. Soon, the dog had a full-blown cult following. Candles were lit, pilgrimages were made, babies were dipped in wells. The church was horrified. They even had the shrine of the dog destroyed and the remains of the dog burnt. But the worship persisted underground for centuries, and some rituals continued even into the 20th century as well. It just shows how myths can turn common things into an object of worship, and how communities will align holiness to anything that fits a comforting narrative, even a dog. And last but not the least, the glowing figure of Saint Mother Teresa, a Nobel Prize winning saint. She is known to have preserved suffering in her hospices instead of offering adequate medical care, made remarks against contraception and abortion, and influencing social policy negatively in developing nations. She accepted donations from questionable sources, often without accountability, and used her political power to convert thousands of poor and suffering so that they will obtain the non-existent heaven of Jesus. She definitely deserves a video of her own, so I will expose more of her cruel deeds in that one. Comment under this video if you would like one separate video on Saint Mother Teresa. These are the saints we are told to revere. Their halos are polished, their sins forgotten. But history is not so forgiving. So how exactly does one become a saint? Is it divine election? A heavenly voice whispering into the ears of the Pope? Not quite. It is a process which is bureaucratic, expensive, and disturbingly political. The process starts at the local diocese level, often many years after the person has died. Someone, usually a religious group, petitions the bishop to investigate the person's life. If the bishop agrees, the person is given the title Servant of God. Then starts the process of collecting evidence, documents, testimonials, and of course, miracle stories. This information is sent to the Vatican's dicastery of the causes of saints. Then the real missionary begins. At the Vatican, theologians, historians, and cardinals review the case. If they agree the person lived a life of heroic virtue, then the Pope can declare them venerable. And the golden requirement? 2 confirmed miracles, usually medical healings, attributed to prayers made to the candidate. But here is the problem. These miracles are never scientifically verified in any open or replicable way. They are based on the absence of medical explanation, not on the presence of divine causation. Once the first miracle is verified by church-appointed medical experts and theologians, the Pope can beatify the person. Now they are called blessed. To move from blessed to saint, a second miracle is required. Again, verified by church panels only. Once that happens, the Pope canonizes the person in a grand ceremony. Now the person is universally recognized by the church as a saint, and he or she can be prayed to by anyone and is given feast days, churches, statues, and then the tourism business starts. Until 1983, there was a very interesting figure in this process, the promoter fidei, commonly known as the devil's advocate. His job? To challenge the canonization process, to look for flaws, lies, or exaggerations, to argue against sainthood, like a defense attorney arguing that the person is not guilty. He asks things like, was the miracle real? Was this person really virtuous or just popular? Are there hidden political motives? It is ironic that till date, no devil's advocate has ever won a case and stopped a person from becoming a saint. It is all done to pull wool over people's eyes, a carefully orchestrated drama by the Vatican. And so in 1983, Pope John Paul II removed the devil's advocate role and made canonizations much faster and easier. Interestingly, Christopher Hitchens, the famous atheist, was once chosen to be a devil's advocate for the canonization of none other than Mother Teresa. Viewers may remember that it was Hitchens who wrote the book The Missionary Position, where he exposed the truth behind Mother Teresa's so-called charitable causes. Hitchens didn't hold back. A man not known to mince his words, Hitchens argued strongly against her getting sainthood. But surprise, surprise, the Vatican moved ahead with beatification in the same year. The commercial aspect of sainthood is rarely discussed, but it is impossible to ignore. In medieval Europe, churches competed for relics, the bones, the blood, and the garments of saints, because relics attracted pilgrims and pilgrims brought money. Churches claimed to have the skull of Saint John, the finger of Thomas, even milk from the Virgin Mary. Sometimes one saint's body was claimed in 3 different cities. No one bothered to ask why Thomas had 5 right arms. I had done a video on one such relic, the Shroud of Turin, some time back. Do check it out if you would like to know how these fake relics fill the church coffers. Miracles, the central selling point of sainthood, thrives in places where access to healthcare is less, education is poor, and desperation runs deep. When a child recovers from illness or when a tumor shrinks, the family thanks the saint, not the doctor or the antibiotic. Why? Because they were told to. Because they were sold a story. In India, miracles are not gifts from above. They are symptoms of systemic failure of a country where science is out of reach, but superstition is always free. We recently saw it at the Kumbh Mela. And we saw people drinking AC water at a temple or worshipping a damp flyover. We even saw this mockery of reason at the recent plane crash, where an unburned Gita created an orgasmic euphoria among certain sections of the people. This land, if unchecked, will soon go to the dogs. To the gods. If sainthood were truly about holiness, then the process would be free from influence, free from money, free from human politics. But it isn't. It is, in many ways, a spiritual marketing strategy, a system carefully designed to draw crowds and attract a hell of a lot of donations to the institution called as church. Suddenly, There are shrines, special masses, pilgrimages, souvenirs, and religious merchandise. Local churches that host relics or claim miracles see huge surges in donations and visitor numbers. In short, saints generate revenue. Period. Some churches sell vials of saint oil, holy cloth, or blessed soil. Others operate like spiritual hospitals and run faith healing scams, promising healings, blessings, success at marriages, studies, and whatnot for a small offering. People give because they believe, but what they are actually funding is religious consumerism. And the saints that they worship, often foreign, fabricated, or historically unclear, are treated as vending machines of blessings. The poor give what little they have, and in return, they are told to keep believing no matter what. It keeps them trapped, and as long as the money keeps flowing, this injustice is not going to stop. For centuries, people have looked up to saints. We were told they were holy, chosen by God, closer to heaven than the rest of us. We were told to pray to them, light candles, give money, and in return, they will protect us, heal us, or bring us blessings. Think about it. The people who go to shrines and churches hoping for a miracle are often the ones who have no other choice. They are sick, they are in pain, they have lost someone, and they are told that if they pray hard enough, give donations, and keep believing, something magical will happen. But it never does. Instead, the only people who benefit are those who run the show, the ones collecting the money, controlling the stories, and keeping the myth alive. This is not faith. This is emotional blackmail. It is a system that makes money out of your pain. Saints are presented as perfect, but when we look closely, many of them did things that were in kind or moral. Some supported violence, some stayed silent during injustice, some were part of systems that hurt others, but they still got called holy. Why? Because sainthood is not really about goodness, it is about control. It teaches us to accept suffering, it teaches us not to ask questions, and it makes us believe that help will come from above, not from within ourselves. But the truth is, we don't need saints to live good lives. We can be kind, honest, and brave without praying to anyone. We can build a better world using our own hands and minds, not waiting for miracles, but making change with reason and courage. Critical thinking is the opposite of blind faith. It asks, why do I believe this? Who benefits from my belief? And most importantly, is this all true? When we think for ourselves, we stop being fooled. We stop being used. We take back our power. And that is what those in power fear the most. A world where people no longer need saints to be good. So, let us stop giving our faith to statues and stories. Let us start giving it to truth, to knowledge, and to each other. Because the biggest miracle is a free and rational mind. If you have one, cherish it forever. That's all for today. See you in the next one.